The divorce papers were lying on the kitchen table as Marcus Hoffman collected his last belongings from the house. It was a sunny day in Brownsville, Texas, one of those deceptive winter days when the temperature climbed above 20 degrees and you could forget that it was actually February outside. But Marcus couldn't forget anything. Not the last 8 years, not the arguments, not the estrangement, and certainly not the feeling that he had never really known his wife. Elena stood at the window, her arms crossed in front of her chest, watching him silently. She was wearing one of those airy dresses she loved so much, light blue with white flowers, and her long dark hair fell softly over her shoulders. Even now, after everything that had broken between them, Marcus found her beautiful. Perhaps that was the worst part. He had loved her, truly loved her, and yet it hadn't been enough. Marcus was 32 when they met. He worked as a patrol officer in Brownsville, a medium-sized city on the border with Mexico, where the heat became unbearable in summer and life oscillated between American and Mexican culture. Eleanor was new to town, working in a small boutique downtown, selling handmade jewelry and crafts from Latin America. She had told him she was from Monterrey, Mexico, and had moved to the United States a few years ago to start a new life. Her family was small, she said. No siblings, parents who had died young. She was alone in the world, and Marcus had felt the need to protect her. Their relationship developed quickly. Marcus wasn't a man of many words, but Eleanor seemed to appreciate that. They talked about simple things. The weather, work, plans for the weekend. She laughed at his bad jokes, cooked him enchiladas when he came home after a long shift, and listened patiently when he talked about the difficulties of his job. He liked her calmness, her gentleness, the way she never demanded too much. After 6 months, they got married in a small ceremony at the registry office. No big celebration, no guest lists, just the two of them and 2 witnesses. Elena wanted it that way, and Marcus didn't mind. The first few years were good, not perfect, but good enough. They lived in a small house on the outskirts of town, one of those typical Texan bungalows with faded white paint and a front yard that Marcus never really took care of. Eleanor continued to work at the boutique. Marcus worked shift after shift, and they led a quiet, unremarkable life. No children, although Marcus would have liked to have some at some point. But Elena always avoided the subject. Medical reasons, she once said vaguely. She didn't want to talk about it, and Marcus respected that. He'd grown up in a time when you didn't invade your wife's privacy, when you didn't ask questions if they weren't meant to be answered. But over time, the cracks began to show. Small things at first. Elena was strangely reticent when it came to her past. She had no photos from her childhood, no old friends who visited, no family stories to share. When Marcus asked, she just smiled sadly and said that some memories were painful. He accepted that, because he too had parts of his past that he didn't want to talk about. But it was more than that. Elena never went to the doctor, refused to fill out insurance forms, and got nervous when Marcus suggested they travel to Mexico together to visit her hometown. Then the arguments began, not loud, not heated, but constant, like a slow poison eating away at their marriage. Marcus wanted more intimacy. Eleanor withdrew. Marcus wanted to talk about the future. Elena lived only in the moment. Marcus wanted honesty. Elena evaded. Eventually, it felt like they were living side by side, 2 strangers who happened to share the same space. Last fall, Elena filed for divorce. It came as a surprise, although in hindsight, Marcus should have known it was coming. One evening, she sat at the kitchen table, laid the papers in front of him, and said calmly, "I think it's time." No tears, no dramatic explanation, just that simple statement. Marcus asked why, and Elena simply replied, "We're not right for each other, Marcus. We tried, but it's not working." What could he say to that? He felt like he was fighting a shadow, something he couldn't grasp. The divorce went smoothly. No children, no major assets, no bitter battles over property. Elena got the house. Marcus moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. They settled everything out of court, quickly and painlessly, like a business transaction that had to be completed. 30 days later, they sat before the judge, signed the final documents, and it was over. 8 years of marriage ended with a stamp and a signature. So now Marcus stood in the house that had once been theirs, packing the remaining boxes. Elena said nothing as he gathered his things. Old police uniforms, a few books, his coffee maker, which she had never used. He didn't want anything sentimental, no photos, no memories. He just wanted to get out. As he carried the last box to the car, he turned around one last time. Elena was still standing at the window, her face partially hidden in the shadows. For a moment, he wanted to say something, to ask if it really had to end this way, if there wasn't a way to fix things after all. But the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he just nodded briefly, got into his car, and drove away. His new apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Marcus had never really had to deal with loneliness before, not like this. The apartment was small, functional, impersonal. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen he would hardly ever use. He put down the boxes, opened a can of beer, and sat down on the old sofa he had bought at a flea market. Outside, it was slowly getting dark, and the streetlights were coming to life. He thought of Elena, of the way she smiled when she thought he wasn't looking, of the silence between them, which sometimes felt like an ocean, of the questions he had never asked because he was afraid of the answers. Now it was too late. They were divorced, and soon she would be just a memory, a chapter in his life that he had closed. But Marcus didn't know that the story wasn't over yet, that 30 days later, everything he thought he knew about Elena would turn out to be a lie, and that this lie would force him to make a decision that would change his life forever. The next few weeks passed in a fog of routine and monotony. Marcus worked his shifts, came home, ate something simple, slept for a few hours, and started the cycle all over again. His colleagues noticed the change. Kevin Schultz, his partner, an experienced cop in his late 40s with grey hair and a cynical view of the world, tried several times to get him to talk. But Marcus didn't want to talk. He just wanted to function, to get through one day after another until the pain eventually subsided. He didn't think about Elena much anymore, or at least he tried not to. Sometimes, late at night, when he sat alone in his apartment and the city's sirens wailed outside, the memories came back, but he pushed them away, focusing on work, on cases, on anything that could distract him. Then the call came. It was a Wednesday evening, about a month after the divorce. Marcus was sitting in front of the TV, half-heartedly watching a sports program, when his cell phone rang. The number was blocked. Normally, he wouldn't have answered, but something made him hesitate. He pressed the green button. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was female, older, with a slight Spanish accent. "Am I speaking to Marcus Hoffman?" "Yes. Who is this?" A short pause. "My name is Sofia Mendez. I am Elena's sister." Marcus sat up straight. Elena had never mentioned that she had a sister. She had always said she had no family left. "I'm sorry," he said slowly, "but Elena never told me about you." "I know," the woman replied. "There are many things Elena didn't tell you. I'm calling because I think you should know the truth." Marcus's heart began to beat faster. What truth? Another pause, longer this time. Then Sofia said quietly, "Elena is not the person you think she is. Her real name is Esteban Mendez. She is my brother." The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't yet exploded. Marcus didn't immediately understand what she meant. Her brother? No, that didn't make sense. Elena was a woman. He had been married to her for 8 years. He had seen her, touched her, lived with her. How could she? "I know this is hard to understand," Sofia continued, as if she had read his thoughts, "but it's the truth. Esteban had gender reassignment surgery many years ago, back then in Mexico, then later in Colombia to change the paperwork. She has been living as a woman for over a decade, and she hasn't told anyone the truth. Marcus couldn't speak. His brain refused to process the information. It couldn't be true. It couldn't be true. "Why are you telling me this?" he finally managed to say. "Because I think you have a right to know," Sophia said. "I don't know if Elena ever wanted to tell you the truth, but I couldn't keep quiet any longer. You've spent 8 years of your life living a lie, Marcus. That's not fair." Marcus hung up. He couldn't listen anymore. His head was pounding. His hands were shaking. He got up, went to the bathroom, and splashed cold water on his face. When he looked in the mirror, he hardly recognized himself. Was that possible? Could someone maintain such a lie for 8 years? And if it was true, what did that mean for him, for everything they had shared? Marcus spent the next few hours researching online. He typed in terms he never thought he would ever search for. Gender reassignment, surgical procedures, legal name changes. And the more he read, the more he understood that it was indeed possible, that people could change their gender, their identity, their whole lives, and that many of them did so without anyone ever finding out the truth. But that didn't mean it was the case with Elena. Maybe Sophia was crazy, maybe she was lying, maybe it was all just a terrible, sick joke. Marcus had to be sure. The next day, he called the boutique where Elena had worked. The owner, an older woman named Margaret, was surprised to hear from him. "Marcus, how are you? I heard that you and Elena broke up. I'm sorry." "Thanks, Margaret. I wanted to ask you something. Do you know anything about Elena's family?" Margaret hesitated. "Not really. She never talked about it much. I think she had a difficult childhood." "Why do you ask?" "I got a phone call," Marcus said cautiously. "Someone claimed to be her sister." "Oh, really? I didn't know that." "But to be honest, Marcus, Elena was always very private. There were things about her that, well, I'd never understood. She was a good employee, friendly, reliable, but she had this wall around her, you know, like she was hiding something." Marcus thanked her and hung up. His hands were still shaking. He had to talk to Elena, had to confront her, had to hear the truth straight from her. But when he stood in front of her house that evening, he felt something break inside him. Because deep down, he already knew that Sophia had told the truth, and that nothing Elena could say would ever make up for what she had done to him. Marcus stood at the front door and stared at the faded wood he had walked through hundreds of times. His hand trembled as he knocked. Once, twice, 3 times, he heard footsteps inside. Elena opened the door. She was wearing jeans and a simple white t-shirt, her hair tied back in a loose bun. When she saw him, her eyes widened briefly, then her usual calm returned. "Marcus," she said, surprised, "what are you doing here? We need to talk." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." The living room looked the same as always, the same beige sofas, the same coffee table with magazines no one read, the same smell of lavender that Elena liked so much. But to Marcus, everything felt different, strange, as if he were in a house he had never really known. Elena sat down, her hands folded in her lap. "What's going on?" Marcus stood still. "Who is Sophia Mendez?" Elena's face froze. The color drained from her cheeks. She didn't answer right away, and in that silence lay the confirmation Marcus had been looking for. "She called me," Marcus continued, his voice hoarse. "She said she was your sister. She said your real name was Esteban." Elena slowly stood up and turned her back to him. "Please, Marcus, is it true?" His voice grew louder. "Is it true, damn it?" She turned around, tears welling up in her eyes. Yes, the word hit him like a blow. Marcus staggered back a step and had to hold on to the doorframe. 8 years, he whispered. "You lied to me for 8 years." "I didn't lie to you," Elena said with a trembling voice. "I am who I am. I am Elena. I was long before I met you. "You're a man," Marcus shouted. "You're a damn man." "I was a man," she corrected calmly, "but not anymore. I've spent my whole life becoming the person I really am. The surgery, the hormones, the paperwork, it was all real. I'm a woman, Marcus." He shook his head, incredulous, angry, hurt. "You should have told me. Before the wedding, at the beginning, sometime. But not never." "I was afraid," Elena confessed. "Afraid you would leave me. Afraid you would hate me. And I was right, wasn't I? Look at you. That's exactly what happened." Marcus clenched his fists. "You had no right to take that decision away from me. I had the right to know who I was sharing my life with, and I had the right to live as the woman I am," Elena replied sharply. "I never hurt you, Marcus. I was a good wife. I loved you." "Love?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "That wasn't love. That was deception." Elena stepped toward him, tears now streaming down her face. "I wanted to tell you, so many times. But with each passing day it became harder. I thought that if you really loved me, then you loved me for who I am, not for who I was. But that's not fair," Marcus shouted. "That's not fair. Nothing about it is fair," she shouted back. "Nothing about being born in the wrong body is fair. Nothing about having to hide is fair. Nothing about having to choose between truth and survival is fair." The two stood facing each other, panting, exhausted from the emotional storm. Marcus felt something break inside him, something fundamental that could never be put back together again. "I can't," he whispered finally. "I can't accept this." "Then go," Elena said quietly. "Go and don't tell anyone. Please. At least let me have my life here." Marcus turned and walked to the door. When he reached it, he paused. A question burned inside him, a question he didn't want to ask, but had to. Was anything between us real? Elena sobbed. "Everything, everything was real, Marcus. My feelings for you were the most real thing in my life." He nodded without turning around and left the house. Outside, he breathed in the cool evening air, but it brought no relief. His thoughts raced, anger, shame, confusion, everything mixed together into an unbearable chaos. He got into his car, but didn't drive home. Instead, he drove aimlessly through the city as darkness fell and the streetlights came on one by one. What should he do now? Keep quiet and carry on as if nothing had happened, or tell the truth and destroy Elena's life, just as she had destroyed his? Marcus found no answers that night, only the certainty that nothing would ever be the same again, and that the coming days would demand a decision from him that he never wanted to make. Marcus drove through Brownsville half the night. The streets were empty, with only a few windows lit in the houses. He finally stopped at a gas station on the outskirts of town, bought a bottle of whiskey, and took the first sip right there in the parking lot. It burned, but the pain was welcome. Anything was better than the thoughts in his head. 8 years. 8 damn years of lies. He thought of every touch, every kiss, every night they had shared, and felt his stomach churn. Had any of it been real? Or was it all just a charade, a play in which he had played the role of the unsuspecting husband? He came home around 3 in the morning. The apartment was cold and dark. He sat down on the sofa, the whiskey bottle in his hand, and stared at the wall. Sleep was impossible. The images, the words, Elena's tears, everything repeated endlessly in his head. The next morning, Kevin called. "Marcus, where are you? You should have started an hour ago." Marcus rubbed his eyes. "I'm sick, can't make it today." "You don't sound sick, you sound drunk." "Just leave me alone, Kevin." A pause. Then Kevin said more quietly, "What happened?" Marcus wanted to hang up, but something held him back. The burden of silence was too heavy. "I found out something about Elena." "What?" The words came out with difficulty. "She was a man before the operation. She never told me." Kevin was silent for a long time. Then, "Shit, man, that's..." I don't know what to say. Neither do I, whispered Marcus. Do you want to talk about it? I'll come over. No, I have to figure this out on my own. But Kevin came anyway. An hour later, he was standing at the door with 2 coffee mugs in his hand. They sat silently next to each other until Kevin finally asked, "What are you going to do now?" "I don't know," Marcus replied. "Part of me wants to forget her and move on. But the other part wants everyone to know what she did." "Revenge?" "Justice," Marcus corrected. Kevin sighed. "Be careful what you do. Things like that can end badly." But Marcus wasn't listening. A plan was already forming in his head, dark and dangerous, born of anger and humiliation. Elena had stolen 8 years from him. She had made a fool of him, and she would pay for it. In the days that followed, Marcus began talking to his colleagues, at first cautiously, then more directly. He mentioned Elena's secret casually, dropped hints, planted doubts. The news spread like wildfire through the small police station, then into the town. Brownsville wasn't big. Rumors traveled fast. Elena noticed it immediately. The looks in the boutique, the whispering when she walked by, the sudden coldness of her neighbors. She called Marcus, pleading, desperate, "Please stop. You're destroying my life." "You destroyed mine," he replied coldly and hung up. But something inside him began to stir. Doubt, remorse, the realization that he had gone too far. Kevin warned him, "You're playing with fire, man. Stop before something bad happens," but it was already too late. The avalanche Marcus had set in motion could no longer be stopped, and it would soon bury everything beneath it. A week later, Elena lost her job. Margaret called her into the office, avoided eye contact, and said in a low voice, "I'm sorry, Elena, but some customers have complained. They feel uncomfortable. I can't keep you here anymore." Elena understood. She packed her things without saying a word and left the boutique where she had worked for 6 years. Outside, several women were already waiting, glaring at her with hostility. One spat at her feet. That same evening, Elena found a note on her front door, smeared with red paint. "Liar, freak, get lost." She called Marcus, her voice broken. "Are you satisfied now? Is that enough for you?" Marcus sat in his apartment, the bottle of whiskey almost empty. He felt sick, not from the alcohol, but from what he had done. "I didn't mean to—" "What didn't you want?" she sobbed. "You didn't want to destroy me? Too late, Marcus. You won." She hung up. Marcus stared at the phone, feeling panic rising inside him. Kevin had been right. He had gone too far, way too far. The next day, he tried to reach Elena. She didn't answer. He drove to her house. The curtains were drawn, the car was in the driveway, but no one answered the door. He knocked, called her name, and finally pounded on the door. "Elena, please, we need to talk." Nothing. Marcus went to the police station, but Kevin wasn't there. Instead, he ran into Captain Ramirez, who gave him a cold stare. "Hoffman, come into my office. Now." Ramirez closed the door and turned to him. "I heard what you said about your ex-wife, all over town. Do you realize that could have consequences?" "She lied to me, sir. That doesn't give you the right to ruin her life. You're a police officer, Hoffman. You should respect the law, not take justice into your own hands." Ramirez sighed. "I'm suspending you. 2 weeks, unpaid. Think about your behavior." Marcus left the station in a daze. Everything was falling apart. His marriage, his job, his self-respect, and Elena. What had he done to her? That evening he sat in his apartment again, cell phone in hand, staring at Elena's number. He had to see her, had to apologize, had to somehow limit the damage he had done. He decided to drive to her house again. This time he wouldn't give up until she spoke to him. But when he arrived, there was already an ambulance in front of the house. Blue lights, people, police officers. Kevin was standing at the side of the road, his face ashen. What happened? Marcus jumped out of the car. Kevin looked at him, and there was something in his eyes that Marcus had never seen before. Disgust. Elena. She tried to kill herself. The neighbor found her. Marcus's world collapsed. No, 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 no. Paramedics carried a stretcher out of the house, a figure covered, motionless. Marcus tried to get closer, but Kevin held him back. Leave it, man. You've already done enough damage. Is she alive? Marcus whispered. Kevin didn't answer. He didn't have to. Elena survived. Barely. The doctors at Mercy Hospital explained to Marcus that she had taken massive amounts of sleeping pills. Her stomach was pumped. She was in intensive care, unconscious, hooked up to machines that were keeping her alive. Marcus wasn't allowed to see her. He was no longer her husband. He no longer had any rights. He sat in the waiting room, his head in his hands, as the hours passed. Kevin had brought him there and sat silently beside him. Other colleagues came and went, giving him reproachful looks. After 2 days, Eleanor woke up, weak, confused, but alive. Marcus heard the news from a nurse. She'll survive, she said tersely, but she doesn't want to see you. Nevertheless, he tried. He sneaked into the intensive care unit hallway and found her room. He saw her through the small window in the door, pale, thin, with tubes in her arms and nose. She lay there like a broken bird. A hand rested on his shoulder. Sofia Mendez was standing behind him, the woman whose call had set everything in motion. She was older than Eleanor, with grey streaks in her black hair and deep wrinkles around her eyes. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "I need to talk to her. She doesn't want to see you." Sofia stepped beside him. "You know what you've done, don't you?" Marcus couldn't look her in the eye. "I'm sorry. Sorry won't bring Esteban back," Sofia corrected herself. Elena. She never used that name, but now it seemed important. She spent her whole life being herself, and you took that away from her. In 1 week. I didn't mean to. Yes, you did. Sofia turned away. Revenge, pride, wounded male pride. That's what you wanted. And now my sister has to pay for it. She left, and Marcus was left alone. The truth of her words hit him like a knife. A week later, Elena was released. She didn't move back into her house. Sofia had brought her to Houston, away from Brownsville, away from the stairs, away from Marcus. Marcus returned to work, but nothing was the same. His colleagues avoided him. Captain Ramirez watched him suspiciously. Kevin hardly spoke to him anymore. At night, Marcus drank. During the day, he functioned mechanically. Guilt ate away at him. He hadn't wanted to kill Elena. He had only wanted... What? Justice? Satisfaction? Now it all seemed so ridiculous, so petty. He tried to reach Elena. He wrote messages that went unanswered. He called but got her voicemail. He drove to Houston, found the address, but Sofia wouldn't open the door. "Please," he pleaded through the door. "I need to see her. I need to make it up to her." "You can't make it up to her." Sofia's voice came from inside. "Leave before I call the police." 2 months passed. Marcus sank deeper. Alcohol, insomnia, self-loathing. Kevin tried to reach him once. "You have to let go, man. It's over." But Marcus couldn't let go. The guilt was a weight that crushed him, a shadow that made every breath difficult. Then, one Thursday morning, his phone rang. An unknown number. Yes, it was Sofia. Her voice sounded hollow. "Elena is dead. The world ceased to exist." "What?" "Last night," she tried again. This time we didn't find her in time." Marcus sank to his knees. "No, it's your fault," Sofia said, her voice cold as ice. "Her blood is on your hands, Marcus Hoffman. Live with that." She hung up. Marcus sat on the floor of his apartment, the phone still in his hand, unable to move. Elena's face appeared before his eyes, again and again, smiling, crying, desperate. His fault. All his fault. He didn't know how long he sat there. Hours, perhaps. When it got dark, he reached for the whiskey bottle, but his hands were shaking so badly that he couldn't open it. Instead, he laid his head on his knees and cried. For the first time since childhood, he cried, and the tears wouldn't stop. Kevin found him the next morning. The door had been unlocked. "Marcus, man," I heard. "Shit, I'm so sorry." "I killed her," Marcus whispered hoarsely. "I killed her, Kevin." "You didn't kill her. She killed herself." "Yes, he did." Kevin didn't understand. No one understood. Marcus may not have put the pills in her mouth, but he had driven her to despair. He had taken everything from her, her dignity, her job, her security, her hope. What was left for a person when everything was destroyed? The funeral took place a week later in Houston. It was a small, private ceremony. Marcus only found out about it by chance when he saw the obituary in the newspaper. He drove there, but didn't know if he should go in. He stood in front of the chapel and watched the few mourners enter. Sophia was there, along with a few others he didn't know. Probably friends from Elena's new life in Houston, people who knew her as the woman she was. Marcus stayed outside. He had no right to be there. When the ceremony began, he sat down on a bench in the shade of a tree and listened to the muffled voices from inside. He heard Sophia speak, her voice breaking several times. She talked about Eleanor as a child, as a teenager who had always known she was different, about the struggle, about the courage to become the person she was meant to be, about the love she had given and the rejection she had received. Marcus buried his face in his hands. Every word was a stab in his heart. After the funeral, he waited until everyone had left. Then he went to the grave. It was a simple stone, still without a name. Soon it would read, Elena Mendez, 1985-2024. Beloved sister. Nothing about her time as his wife. Nothing about the 8 years they had spent together. It was as if that part of her life had never existed. Maybe it was better that way. Marcus knelt down and placed his hand on the fresh earth. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so incredibly sorry, Elena. But apologies couldn't bring back the dead." As he stood up, he noticed Sophia in the distance under another tree. She was watching him silently. Marcus walked toward her. She didn't back away, but her gaze was hard as stone. "I know you hate me," Marcus said quietly. "I hate myself too." "Hate?" Sophia shook her head. "Hate would be too easy. I feel nothing for you, Marcus Hoffman. You are empty to me. Nothing." Her words hit harder than any accusation. "Elena loved you," Sophia continued. "Really loved you. She wrote me letters in the last few days. Do you know what she said about you? She said you were the only person she ever felt safe with, at least for a while." Marcus couldn't speak. The tears started flowing again. "She forgave you," Sophia said, her voice softening. "In her last letter, she wrote that she understood why you reacted the way you did. She blamed herself for not telling you the truth. She thought that if she had been honest, none of this would have happened." "But it wasn't her fault," Marcus whispered. "It was mine. I should have—" "You could have shown compassion," Sophia interrupted. "You could have been understanding. Instead, you chose revenge. You made her life public, humiliated her, turned the town against her. You took away every way out for her. I know. Elena wanted me to give you this." Sophia pulled an envelope out of her bag. A letter. "I didn't want to do it, but it was her last wish." Marcus took the letter with trembling hands. The envelope was light, containing only a single folded sheet. Sophia's name was written on it in Elena's delicate handwriting, "For Marcus." "Read it later," Sophia said. "Alone." Then she turned and walked away without looking back. Marcus stood at the grave for a long time, the letter in his hand. Finally, he returned to his car and opened the envelope. The words were short, but they burned themselves into his brain. "Marcus, I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I don't want to die with hatred in my heart. I loved you. That was real. Everything else was complicated, but the love was real. I hope that one day you can forgive yourself. I hope that one day you understand that I was just trying to survive. Farewell, Elena." Marcus folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and drove to Brownsville. In the weeks that followed, the investigation began. The police questioned him, Captain Ramirez, other colleagues. Had he threatened Elena? Had he known she was suicidal? Marcus answered truthfully, no, he hadn't threatened her directly, but yes, he had spread her secret, isolated her, destroyed her life. The legal consequences were limited. He hadn't broken any laws, at least none that would hold up in court. But morally, the verdict was clear. Captain Ramirez called him into his office. "Hoffman, I can't fire you. Technically, you haven't done anything illegal, but I can't keep you here either. You're a liability to the department. Here's what I'm offering you. Take early retirement with full benefits. Just disappear." Marcus nodded. He didn't have the strength to fight. A month later, he left Brownsville. He sold his apartment, packed the few things that were still important to him into his car, and drove north. No plans, no destination, just away from the memories, away from the stairs, away from the city where he had lost everything. He eventually ended up in a small town in New Mexico. No one knew him there. No one knew what he had done. He took a job as a night watchman in a warehouse, lived in a cheap motel, talked to no one. Loneliness was his punishment, and he accepted it. At night, when he couldn't sleep, he read Elena's letter over and over again. "I forgive you." But could he forgive himself? No, never. Years passed. Marcus aged, turned grey, became bitter, a shadow of the man he once was. He drank less, worked mechanically, existed without living. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, he thought of Elena, of her smile, her gentleness, the love she had given him. And he wondered what would have happened if he had reacted differently. If he had chosen compassion instead of anger. If he had understood that people are complex, that truth can take many forms, that love means more than biological facts. But these thoughts came too late, far too late. Elena was dead, and Marcus lived with the knowledge that he had killed her, not with his hands, but with his words, his actions, his hatred. That was his true punishment. Not prison, not public shame, but the knowledge that he had driven a woman who loved him to her death, and that he had to live with that every day for the rest of his life. In a small town in New Mexico, an old man sat alone in a dark room and wondered if there was forgiveness for things that could not be undone. The answer remained elusive.